Hi everyone. This is a real special story for me because I read it as the first creepypasta I ever came across. And honestly, I believed it. It's surreal how good this is. And by good, I mean disturbing. So, without further ado, this is Penpal. Chapter 1, Footsteps. This is long, so I apologize for that. I've never really had to tell this story with enough detail to actually explain it all the way. But it is true, and it happened when I was 6 years old. In a quiet room, if you press your ear against a pillow, you can hear your heartbeat. As a kid, the muffled rhythmic beats sounded like soft footsteps on a carpeted floor. So almost every night, just as I was about to drift asleep, I would hear these footsteps and would be ripped back to consciousness, terrified. For my entire childhood, I lived with my mother in a fairly nice neighborhood that was in a transitional phase. People of lower economic means were gradually moving in, and my mother and I were two of those people. We lived in the kind of house you would see being transported in two pieces on the interstate, but my mother took good care of it. There were a lot of woods surrounding the neighborhood that I would play in and explore during the day. But at night, as often, at night, as things often do to a kid, they took a more sinister feeling. This coupled with the fact that due to the nature of our house, there was a fairly large crawl space underneath, filled my mind with imaginary monsters and inescapable scenarios which could consume my thoughts when I was awoken by footsteps. I told my mother about the footsteps, and she said that I was imagining things. I persisted enough that she blasted my ears with a turkey baster once, just to placate me, since I thought that would help. Of course, it didn't. Despite all the creepiness and the footsteps, the only thing that ever happened was that every now and then I would wake up on the bottom bunk despite having gone to bed on the top. But this wasn't really weird since I'd sometimes get up to piss or sometimes to drink water and could remember going back to sleep on the bottom bunk. I'm an only child, by the way, so it didn't matter. This would happen once or twice a week, but waking up on the bottom bunk wasn't too terrifying. One night, I didn't wake up on the bottom bunk. I had heard footsteps, but I was too far gone to be woken up by them. And when I awoke, it wasn't from the sound of footsteps or a nightmare, but it was because I was cold, really cold. When I opened my eyes, I saw stars. I was in the woods. I sat up immediately and tried to figure out what was going on. I thought I was dreaming, but that didn't seem right, though neither did me being in the woods. There was a deflated pool right in front of me, one of those ones that's shaped like a shark. This added to the surreal feeling. But after a while, it seemed like I wasn't going to wake up because I wasn't asleep. I stood up to orient myself, but I didn't recognize these woods. I played in the woods next to my house all the time, so I knew them really well. But if these weren't the same woods, then how could I get out? I took a step and shooting pain ran through my foot, which knocked me back to where I was laying. I stepped on a thorn. By the light of the moon, I could see that I was surrounded by them. And yet, when I looked at myself or my other foot, I didn't have a single scratch. I wasn't even dirty. I cried for a little bit, but then I stood back up. I didn't know which way to go, so I just picked a direction. I resisted the urge to call out since I wasn't sure I wanted to be found by who or what might be out there. I walked for what seemed like hours. I tried to walk in a straight line and tried to course correct when I had to take detours. But I was a kid and I was afraid. There weren't any howls or screams, and only once did I hear a noise that scared me. It sounded like a crying baby. I think now it was just a cat, but I panicked. I ran veering in different directions to avoid thick bushes, and collapsed trees. And I was paying close attention to where I stepped because by that point, my feet were in very bad shape. I paid too much attention to where I was stepping and not enough to where these steps were leading me. Because not long after hearing the cry, I saw something that filled me with the kind of despair I haven't experienced since. It was the same pool float again. I was only 10 feet from where I'd woken up. This wasn't magic or something supernatural. I was lost. Up until the moment, I thought more about getting out of the woods than how I got in. But being back caused my mind to swim. I wasn't even sure these were my words. I had only been hoping that they were. Had I run in a huge circle around that spot? Or did I get turned around and start making my way back? How was I going to get out? At the time, I thought the North Star was just the brightest star. So I looked and found the brightest one and followed it. Eventually, things started to look more familiar. And when I saw the ditch, which by the way is a dirt ditch my friends and I would have dirt clawed wars in, I knew I'd made it out. By that point, I was walking really slowly because my feet hurt so much. But I was so happy to be so close to my home that I broke into a light jog. When I actually saw the roof of my house over a neighboring lower set house, I let out a light sob and ran faster. I just wanted to be home. I had already decided that I wouldn't say anything because I had no idea what I could possibly say. I would get back in the house somehow, clean up, and get into bed. My heart sank as I rounded near the corner and my house came into full view. Every light in the house was on. I knew my mother was up, and I knew I had to explain, or at least try to, where I'd been. But I couldn't even figure out where to start. My run became a jog, which became a walk. I saw her silhouette through the blinds, and although I was worried about how I have to explain things to her, that didn't matter to me at this point. I walked up a couple of steps to the porch and put my hand on the doorknob and turned. Right before I pushed it open, two arms wrapped around me and pulled me back. I screamed as loud as I could, "Mom, help me, please, Mom!" The feeling of being so close to being safe and then being physically pulled away from it filled me with a kind of dread that is, even after all these years, indescribable. The door I had been torn away from opened, and a flash of hope shot through my heart. But it wasn't my mom. It was a man, and he was enormous. I thrashed around and kicked at the shins of the person who was holding me, while also trying to get away from the person who had come from the house. I was scared, but I was furious. "Let go of me! Where is she? Where's my mom? What did you do to her?" As my throat stung from screaming, and I was drawing in another breath, I became aware of the sound that had been present longer than I'd perceived. "Honey, please calm down. I've got you." It sounded like my mom. The arms loosened and set me down, and as the man approaching blocked out the boat light with his head, I noticed his clothes. He was a cop. I turned to face his voice. I turned to face the voice behind me and saw that it was really my mom. Everything was okay. I began to cry, and the three of us went inside. "I'm so glad you're home, sweetie. I was worried I'd never see you again." By this point, she was crying too. "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I just wanted to come home. I'm sorry." "It's okay. Just don't ever do that again." I'm not sure me or my shins could take it. A little laughter broke through my sobs, and I smiled. "Well, I'm sorry for kicking you. But why would you grab me like that?" "I was just afraid you'd run away again." I was confused. "What do you mean?" "We found your note on the pillow," she said, and pointed at the piece of paper that the police was sliding across the table. I picked up the note and read it. It was a running away letter. It said that I was unhappy and never wanted to see her or any of my friends again. The police officer exchanged a few words with my mom on the porch while I stared at the letter. I didn't even remember writing it. I don't remember anything of this. But even if sometimes But even if I sometimes went to the bathroom at night and didn't remember, or even if I'd gone to the woods on my own, even if all those things were true, I knew one thing: this isn't how you spell my name. I didn't write this letter. Well, I hope you like the first chapter. I'm gonna keep reading. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this reading of Penpal.